You are listening to part 68 of our series, 7 Medicines, The Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan, and welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. I meant to stop last week and ask you if you had ever worked with Jewelweed.
I've not worked with Jewelweed, but now I want to be on the hunt for it.
Yes, and where did you say you lived?
In Tennessee.
In Tennessee. You will definitely find Jewelweed.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would recognize it. I probably would, maybe don't realize what it is.
Well, there's a couple of reasons why it's called Jewelweed. One is, if you remember, I said that it always grows in a wet area.
Yes.
And usually where there's a little running stream, which we've got lots of in Tennessee. If you take the plant and you kind of push it underwater and then let it spring back up above the water, it isn't wet.
Oh.
And that's one of the reasons it's called Jewelweed, because the water beads up on it.
Okay.
And it's also called Jewelweed because of the jewel-like flowers that it has. The flowers look like little orchids, and they're very bright orange or very bright yellow. And they kind of dangle down.
Sounds pretty.
Really pretty. And remember that it has kind of a shallow root, which is reddish in color. And it's that red color in the root that makes that jewelweed broth turn orange. And Dr. James Duke said that he was so fascinated when he heard me talk about jewelweed because he hadn't heard anybody talking about it as an antihistamine. And that I stressed that the broth had to be orange or it wouldn't work. And he went home. He's really into constituents. And what he found was that henna, which is Rauwolfia, contains a compound called rauwolfine, which is, you guessed it, orange in color, and that compound is also in jewelweed and concentrated in the roots. Now, you can't drink henna. There's too much rauwolfine in it, but the amount in the jewelweed is just the right amount. Now that I have seen Gretchen boiling it up in witch hazel, I'm probably going to, make some for keepers that way, because that's a really easy way to keep it. Generally, what I've been doing is just boiling up the broth and then freezing the broth, but I always have helpers who come along and throw out my rusty ice cubes. All right, what did I not talk about last week when we were talking about herbal antihistamines? Well, I must mention Plantain. Plantain, who told me she's a Quaker lady who just wants peace, is probably one of the best external antihistamines that I have ever used. Have you had occasion to use Plantain?
I use Plantain quite frequently, actually, and just gave it to somebody to use. They had something on their finger, like a hangnail that was infected, and I had some Plantain salve in my desk drawer, gave it to him. He said within a half hour his finger felt amazing.
And what's going on there is in part a histamine reaction to it and an infection. And when that infection sets in, the histamine comes to that area, and it turns red and gets oozy and swells up. And the Plantain can help stop that histamine reaction. Again, a little histamine reaction, very good. More white blood cells getting there to counter the infection. A really big histamine reaction, not so good. The infection's going to get worse. So the Plantain really brings it right into that beautiful, perfect zone. And last summer, I was walking barefoot through the grass, as I am wont to do, and I stepped on a bee and went, ow, 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 went hopping on one foot over to where the apprentices were, sat down, showed them how to extract the bee stinger. You can't pull it out because there's little venom sacs on either side of it, and if you do that, you actually squeeze the venom through the hollow stinger into you. You got to scrape it out without touching those little venom sacs. And then I looked around for some Plantain, chewed up the Plantain, put it on my toe, and within 5 minutes, the swelling, the itching and the pain was gone. Now, if I had been a very smart girl, I would have continued to do that, but I was involved in doing something else, so I was kind of dumb girl, and I didn't reapply my plantain poultice, and within about an hour, I looked down and I said, oh, look at that, my toe is red, and then I stopped and applied some more plantain and relieved all of that swelling. Hooray, hooray, hooray. If you have a whole lot of basil, a poultice of basil is considered to be nearly as good as a poultice of plantain. So if you happen to be in one of those places where there's no plantain, and you know what? I have yet to be in one of those places. I've yet to be anywhere on this planet where there isn't plantain. My first day in Australia, I went out for a walk in Melbourne, right along the city streets, apartment buildings and corner stores, and sure enough, there was plantain growing right in the sidewalk. I've seen it in Costa Rica. I've seen it in Australia. I have seen it in Canada. I have seen it in Europe, all over the place, and it grows in South America. We know plantain, our beloved weed. But if you have more basil than plantain, you could use basil too. It's okay. Eyebright is a plant that people have believed is a hay fever remedy, but I have not found it to be so. At least not with the American eyebright. So I was very surprised when I went to Europe and encountered the European eyebright, which seems to have a much stronger effect. And interestingly enough, European eyebright is a fairly common plant of meadows, whereas the American eyebright, I've only ever seen it once. Linden, of course, is a great favorite herbal antihistamine of mine. It is so soothing to all of the mucous membranes, relieves congestion, relieves itching, relieves soreness, all through the respiratory system and the reproductive system. Hooray, hooray for our good friend Linden. Well, there was a website about antihistamines that was devoted entirely to salt. That's staggering, isn't it?
It is.
I said, what? What are these people on about? I actually spent some time there, reading up. And basically what they said is the best natural antihistamine in the world is salt.
Just plain old salt? Or like pink
Plain
Himalayan?
old salt. Now, needless to say, they had a whole website. And so they went into great detail about this. And if you put in salt as an antihistamine, I bet you'll find them. And they talk about what's going on and why it's not a good idea to decrease the amount of salt in your diet unless you're getting a lot of salt from processed foods. And of course, this is not really made clear. We get this supposed medical thing, eat less salt. And if you're not eating processed foods, you're probably not eating quite enough salt, they say. So what they say is, listen, if you have an allergic reaction to something, just put some salt on your tongue. If it stops that reaction, then you know we're right. And I thought, well, my gosh, that's even a little bit better than Jeannie Rose's tea, isn't it?
That's interesting.
Talk about easy and fast and at hand just about everywhere and even easy to carry. And they said you don't have to swallow it. You don't have to consume it. You just put it on your tongue. And if you want to, you can even spit it out after the symptoms are gone and rinse your mouth.
I'll have to carry salt.
I said, okay, hey, I'll tell people about it, because if it doesn't work, what have you lost? You put a little salt on your tongue and you'll never do it again. Before we totally leave the herbal antihistamines, however, I do want to mention Oreganum vulgare, which is wild marjoram or wild oregano, and it contains 7 different antihistaminic chemicals. And I personally was really just beside myself with delight when I read this, because I have big patches of wild marjoram growing in my land. It has virtually no scent at all. I take people over to say, this is wild oregano, this is wild marjoram. Smell it. And they're smelling and they're thinking, something must be wrong with me. I can't smell anything. And then, I reveal it has basically, it's a scentless mint. It's a mild thing. But when I read that it has 7 different antihistaminic substances in it, and that you can tincture the fresh herb, I said, all right. After living with this plant for 30 years, I have finally discovered a really great use for it. This coming summer, you watch me. I'm going to be out there tincturing my wild oregano, and then we will see what happens with that. All right. Last week I mentioned quercetin. Have you heard of quercetin?
I have not.
Quercetin, or quercetin, is a compound first found in quercus. And quercus is the botanical name of oak. And so we first found quercetin in oak. When you read about it nowadays, you do not read about getting it from oak. You read about getting it from a whole lot of other things. Basically, studies find that quercetin gets rid of histamine from the body. The scientists say it is active against histamine, or it's a histamine antagonist. In other words, it counters the histamine. It lessens the respiratory side effects of allergies by reducing inflammatory responses in the airways. Yay for quercetin. Now, obviously, this stuff is bottled and sold, and you can take it as a supplement, but it's found in onion skins, apple peel, citrus fruits, broccoli, berry, garlic, green tea and black tea, grapefruit, okra, grapes, red wine, and of course you could do oak bark tea. Quercetin and picogenol inhibit the release of histamine in the same way that certain drugs do. In other words, they make that little spring release mechanism with the IgE kind of rusty, so it doesn't work very well. One of the ways that I like to see to it that there's some quercetin in my diet is to keep those peely things like the onion skins or the apple peels, carrot ends, and celery, and to make a broth of them rather than buying soup stock, rather than buying bouillon cubes. I save my onion peels. There's always onion peels laying around, and add any of these other things and cook it up as a basis for soups. A really wonderful way to make sure that there's quercetin in your diet. It's not just a natural antihistamine. It has a lot of other good health things going on for it as well. Speaking of eating things, eating garlic and onions retards inflammatory processes in the body. You probably heard me more than once mention Dr. James Duke. I've already mentioned him, I think, last week. And talking about how when he would go out in the Amazon jungle, he would put an onion in his pocket. And he said that anytime anybody on the trip, himself included, got stung, bitten by anything, plant or animal, he would slice the onion in half and put the cut half of that onion, wham, right up against whatever it was, and that it would immediately stop the inflammatory response. Eating them is also a way to slow down inflammatory responses. The more garlic and onions in your diet, the less likely you are to have hay fever or other allergies. And of course, we all know that those omega-3 fatty acids calm down inflammatory response as well. The general belief is that omega-3 fatty acids slow down inflammation and omega-6 fatty acids increase inflammation. So omega-6 fatty acids are found in seed oils like vegetable oil or corn oil or even flax oil. And omega-3 fatty acids are found in nuts like walnuts, in salmon, especially wild-caught salmon, in grass-fed meat, and in flax seeds. Yes, there are omega-6s in the flax seeds, but if you don't turn them into oil, but just grind the seeds and use them, then you get more of the omega-3 punch from those flax seeds. Eating well to prevent allergic reactions is not something that is onerous. Walnuts and salmon, grass-fed meat, apples and citrus fruit, broccoli and berries, okra and red wine, tea. Wow, we got a great meal set up before us. And let's add some carrots, sweet potatoes, blueberries, strawberries, tomatoes, and peppers, all of which are rich in both flavonoids and carotenes. Flavonoids actually act like antihistamines, and they work in conjunction with anti-inflammatory carotenes. Carotenes, of course, are those things that our body uses to make vitamin A out of. So we don't actually ingest vitamin A. We get vitamin A activity by ingesting brightly colored plants that contain carotenes. Those are leafy greens, bright red things, bright orange things, even yellow things, and it turns out that even those dark purple and blue things have carotenes too. You probably remember from a few years back when we were talking about the ABCs of vitamins, and we talked about vitamin A and how in order to create vitamin A from carotenes, the carotenes have to be liberated from the matrix of the plant. And that very good studies have found tomato paste, for instance, which has been cooked for hours and hours and hours, is hundreds of times more effective as a precursor to vitamin A than raw tomatoes. It often comes as a shock to people to be told that cooking a vegetable will actually increase the amount of nutrients in it. And this is specifically true when it comes to carotenes. Now, of course, if we cook the vegetables in lots and lots of water and we throw that water away, we are throwing away some of the carotene content. So while we do want to cook our brightly colored fruits and vegetables, and especially our leafy greens, for at least an hour, we want to cook it in a very small amount of water. I call it the 1-inch method, so that by the time it's done cooking, there is no water left. But if you're cooking a big pot of greens, keep an eye on it, because that 1 inch might just evaporate, and we don't want you to have charred greens. It doesn't increase the ability of those carotenes to work. So what do we have that is found in food that are natural antihistamines? We have carotenes. If you're bothered by allergic responses or overactive histamine responses, get more red, green, yellow, blue, purple, rainbow-colored foods in your diet and cook them all. Flavonoids. Flavonoids which actually act like antihistamines in the body and work very closely in conjunction with those carotenes. Well, easy for us. They're usually found in the very same foods. What are those foods that are high in flavonoids? Carrots, yep, they're orange. Sweet potatoes, yep, they're orange. Blueberries, yep, they're blue. Strawberries, tomatoes, yep, they're red. And peppers, yep, they're red. Brightly colored foods. Then we also talked about quercetin, which is, like carotenes and flavonoids, an antioxidant. The class of compound is an antioxidant, and it's found in, yep, those same places, right? The berries, the grapes, the red wine, the skins, especially of red onions. Yeah, the yellow onions will do, white onions not so much. We're starting to see a theme here, that the more colorful the diet, the less likely we are to be bothered by allergies and allergic symptoms. Bromelain is a compound that is found in pineapple and in pills at the health food store. It is sometimes taken to facilitate the use of quercetin and picogenol in the body. You would have to eat a fair amount of pineapple to get the amount of bromelain that people are usually using in studies, but 400 to 500 milligrams 3 times a day has been found to very effectively relieve respiratory distress and to counter the inflammation that is associated with allergies. The people that I hear talking about bromelain are usually telling me that they are taking it because there's inflammation at their joints. And once again, that is a histamine reaction. When we have that reddening and that swelling, those are histamine reactions. Vitamin C, also considered a natural antihistamine, but taken in very, very, very high doses, 3 to 5 grams of vitamin C taken during the time when you are having allergic reactions, in other words, for hay fever, or that amount taken at the time when you're having a very strong histamine overreaction. When I think about what I'd rather carry in my pocket, I think I'd rather carry a little packet of salt that I could just get at a restaurant or from an airplane, rather than taking a whole bunch of vitamin C tablets around in my pocket where they are, we're sure, going to get gooey. Similarly, I'm probably not going to be carrying around supplements of B12, but I thought I had one of those aha moments. Yes, you know, we know that vitamin B12 can be lacking in some people, either because they literally can't absorb it from their food or because they have chosen a diet that doesn't have adequate amounts of it. And that for people who have especially skin allergic reactions, taking supplements of vitamin B12, and it needs to be something that's not taken in a pill form, because, again, if you're not being able to get it from your food, getting it from a pill is not going to work for you either. Often a nasal spray is used. But for certain people, supplements of vitamin B12 can really turn around what is going on with their allergic response. Similarly, people have used a variety of antihistaminic things like evening primrose oil, magnesium citrate, honey, and just about anything that is at hand that seems to work at the time. Last week we talked about the myth of honey and why eating even raw local honey or even bee pollen is not really going to get you the kickback on pollen allergies that you were hoping for. So let's spend our last little bit of time here talking about things that we don't take but that we do. And I also wanted to share with you that in addition to going to the Consumer Reports website to find out what they thought were the best antihistamines, I also found several websites that were groups of big groups, open groups of people who use antihistamines. And I thought that we might also want to talk about the users' picks of the best antihistamines. These are the people who my dad would say are in the trenches there, the people who do need to take antihistamines, who simply can't live without them. And interestingly enough, Benadryl was at the top of their list. You recall that that's one of the first generation antihistamines. It's one of the oldest. And what they liked about it was it's not habit forming. It has been used for a long time, so safety issues are very, very clear, and there's not many of them. And it doesn't last long, so that if you do have to do something, that drowsiness isn't going to be affecting you. But it is also a wonderful sleep aid if you have a problem getting to sleep because of allergic or hay fever symptoms. So Benadryl top to the list. Then two from the Consumer Reports, Best Buys, the cetirizine and the loratadine, which is Zyrtec and Claritin. The Zyrtec, the user said, it was the least drowsy making of the lot. And the Claritin was almost as drowsy making as the first generation ones. But they liked also that the Claritin was rather short lasting. Tylenol allergy was also a great favorite, and although users said it's not as effective as the first three antihistamines, it targets several symptoms, and so because of that, it got itself into the top 4 picks from the users groups. All right. What other kinds of things do we have access to that can help us deal with allergies, asthma, and the kind of things we need to take antihistamines? Hypnosis, relaxation, acupuncture, and sunshine. Sunshine, of course, is a precursor to vitamin D. But sunshine, we're going to find out a whole lot more about sunshine as we begin to really look at the health effects of it. John Ott, O-T-T, is an early pioneer in this work. And if you can get hold of his book, Health and Light, he tells you a lot about why it's not just indoor air pollution, but it's indoor light pollution and what's happening to your body when you're under artificial lights and why that is connected to the great rise in allergies and asthma that we are seeing in the 21st century. So get yourself out in some natural sunshine, because allergies and asthma have been with human beings for thousands and thousands of years. The Chinese are happy to stick needles into you, either to relieve your symptoms or to help build you so that you are no longer a sufferer from allergies. Relaxation techniques come up fairly frequently as a natural way to relieve allergic symptoms. And I think we need to circle back around and say, yes, this is partly that we mentioned with the nettle, that there is an adrenal connection there, and the relaxation techniques slow down the production of cortisol, slow down the production of stress hormones, and help the body to not have such a strong histamine reaction. Hypnosis, I had to really smile, because I was just thinking the other day, gosh, you don't hear very much about hypnosis anymore. I haven't seen anybody advertising, a hypnosis to lose weight or to stop smoking. And not that it doesn't necessarily work for that. It could quite possibly work for that. But the kinds of things that I was taught that hypnosis was really specially good for was exactly these kinds of reactions, that the hypnosis brings us to a state where we can kind of get into the control box of our own bodies and to find a way to do what the drugs do, to block the histamine receptor sites, to block the spring mechanism on the mast cells, to block the leukotrienes. And to do that Not necessarily by taking a drug, not even necessarily by taking an herb, but simply by teaching yourself how to operate your own body. Once again, we come to the end. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity every month to be here to restore herbal medicine to its rightful place as people's medicine. It's the medicine of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's the medicine that doesn't change century after century. The plants stay the same, and they help us just the same. Green blessings to you, Gemini, and to everyone at the Time Monk community. Talk to you again next week, next month.
Thank you, Susan. It's always a joy to share our time with you here at Time Monk Radio. And this concludes part 68 of our series, The 7 Medicines the Wise Woman Way, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.